Okay, so I've had this theory for a while now that we don't necessarily have to die. Like our consciousness doesn't have to die. That's one, but I don't really even think our bodies have to die, but that's a whole nother story. I don't think our bodies was ever, well, let's talk about it. I don't think our bodies was ever meant to die. I think that because of dimensional changes, DNA downgrades, dimensional shifts that we're not aware of, the Earth herself being tampered with, which also tampers with our own DNA, and other galactic changes that we're just not aware of with our DNA coding and things like that, have made our bodies incredibly mortal. If we look at different stories, there were a time when humans, Hu meaning God in flesh, man, humans, God people, Godmans, were actually semi immortal. I mean, they lived for a very long time. We're talking thousands of years, some of them, if you read some of the stories. There are also some theories that there are other beings that are living much longer than we are, that are created of flesh and their own type of blood, I guess. So, why is it that humans, us, why is it that we are suddenly only living about 70 years? And that's 70 hard years. That's 70 years of maintaining a vessel that is constantly trying to break down on us. And everything that we love and enjoy kills it. It's crazy, right? It's almost feels like a setup. So I started thinking, you know, maybe, first of all, maybe we don't have to be tethered to these fleshly bodies, especially if they're not in optimal condition. Doesn't mean we have to die. It means we just have to switch vessels. There's something called detachment. Other religions, philosophies definitely talk about detachment. Detachment is talked about in so many different ways. But one thing I realize is there's also this thing called yoked. And I've been looking at that language, yoked, to be yoked to something, to be tethered to something, tied to something. When we astral plane and go into the astral, what I have seen when I go in the astral is a cord that connects me to my body. I've seen it. And after I saw it, a friend told me, hey, there's some research on that where they say that there is a cord that connects you to your body. So I started researching it and I did see where there is supposed to be this cord. But growing from there, I started thinking, does it have to be? Do we have to literally be tied, connected to this vessel to get back into it? I mean, there's this thing called being yoked, like I said. Yoked means to be attached to something. That it's not actually always a good thing. To become too attached to these vessels, like too attached to these bodies, sometimes I think can do us more damage than good. These are just theories in my mind. But as I was going through these theories in my mind, I started looking at something called quantum immortality. So, quantum immortality is the theory that when right before we're about to pass away, okay, so I'm all over the place. So, one thing I need to tell you is about different timelines. So, I think that we can go to different timelines, we can live in different timelines. There are different timelines. There's so many different things with timelines and quantum theories that I think in my mind. One of those that I was kind of thinking about before I even got to quantum immortality was the ability to live in a different timeline. And when I started thinking about merging the timelines, so I wanted to live in the energy of my higher self. But there was also a future self. And there's also these other visions of self that I could see, that I can envision. And I started thinking one day, what if what I'm seeing is actually other versions of myself playing out in front of me? And all I got to do is decide which one that I want so I can be that, so I can be in that timeline. Switching timelines. Something like switching realities. I kind of got there when I started looking at mirror work. Now, what many people don't know is that when you do mirror work, you can actually switch your realities. It's actually happened to some people. Um, Either they know it or they don't. A lot of times they'll say they feel different, things feel odd, their world doesn't feel the same, like all kinds of things like that. And it's because you can switch realities with yourself. You can also switch different levels of yourself. It's just so many different things that kind of go into all of it. But while I was researching all of this, I came upon um, quantum immortality. So, quantum immortality is when right before you die, you switch your consciousness to a different timeline where you don't die. Like almost like Rick and Morty, where they have to switch timelines to a time after they mess up one timeline, they have to go to another timeline where maybe that Rick and Morty has, died so they could take over. Was kind of the same theory, except you just switch your consciousness, not your entire body in the spaceship and all that stuff. You just switch your consciousness to a different timeline. This really isn't that far fetched if you realize how higher level beings actually travel. Higher level beings, and when I say higher level beings, I'm talking about like just higher level beings. I don't really, and we'll call them angelic beings. Um, Beings from other star systems. Call them whatever you want, but higher level beings travel intergalactically and things like that by switching bodies. And this is really how they travel from dimension to dimension to dimension, from fifth to third to fourth to. Let me tell you something. A 3D body can't really survive in a 5D domain. There has to be like some serious upgrades to get there. Now, this is like my theory. My other theory is that we actually can do it, but it takes some really high level biological upgrades with our DNA structure. It requires us actually isolating cells and figuring out what's the genetic marker that we can use to remap the cell. But in order to even do that, we would have to freeze the cell kind of in time while we did the work and then activate the cell for it to regenerate, and then hopefully it'll replicate in a functioning way, not a malfunctioning way, and cause some kind of deformity. Um, to do this biologically, like scientifically, with like tools in a lab, I have no idea. I'm not a scientist. To do this quantum metaphysically wise, I'm figuring it out. But that being said, as the divine or internal alchemist, whichever one I decide to call myself, um, there are things that we are given to upgrade, to change our DNA structure. One of those things is actual just, behavior changes, shadow work, figuring that stuff out, breaking those patterns. Behavior changes DNA structure. This is why they would try to put mass fear in us. Fear changes our DNA structure, and then we then replicate that into our children, into our fetuses, and into our future seeds that haven't even been born yet. It becomes generational curses. Things we continuously do in this life become generational curses for the next life. That's how addiction becomes DNA patterned, and it starts with behavior. Um, But anyway, that's like off topic. We're talking about actually not changing our own biological DNA structure, which I have so many theories on that. But no, we're talking about changing our consciousness from one body to another body. I think this is completely possible. And one way I think it is by, as scary as this is, like, and I don't know if I would really even want to do it because in my mind, I'm like, what if you cut the cord and you never get back into your body? It could be, I don't know. But I think one of the ways to do this is to really detach from your actual body, to cut the cord. Because you got to realize your soul is not equally yoked with this vessel. It's not. And we have to really understand language. We have to really understand what we say, and we have to really understand what we do. I would say one of the things that I study is gematria. Really study gematria, especially with Hebrew, which is where a lot of our language comes from, is, Hebrew, Latin, Greek. Those lexicons, like, study that stuff. I think lexicon is the right word. But that being said, I'm not sure if I'm ready to cut my own cord to try this out, but I'm gonna try to get more information on this quantum immortality. And one of the reasons I'm gonna do it is because simply I know it's true. I know for a fact that high level beings travel outside of their own bodies. That's one reason why we never really know what they look like. We really don't. You really don't know what any of these beings that we think they look like. We don't really know their true form unless they show it to us. They can take on so many forms. And why do you think that is? Because they're not attached to any one form. Because one thing they realize is one is all. So there's this theory of oneness that I'm just now really understanding. And it is a principle of the universe. I'm just not really understanding it on a different perspective, because at first I really didn't like the principle of oneness because it really made me feel it was more like absorption. And that's a whole nother theory. But the principle of oneness makes quantum jumping completely 100% possible, because once you realize is that everything is made up of the same thing, is what I can do to me, I can do to you, I can do to, if I can move this body, I can move that one. If I can live in this body, I can live in that one. If I can, and there are certain like movies that really talk about this theory. The Matrix and Lucy are two that I know really kind of mark this concept that I'm talking about. But you'll notice in my videos that I ramble. So let's get back to it. Quantum jumping. Not quantum jumping, see? Quantum jumping is a thing too. This is quantum jumping. Quantum immortality is a form of quantum jumping. Quantum jumping is jumping from one plane to another, jumping from one reality to another. If you want to say from one timeline to another, quantum jumping. It reminds me of the movie Quantum Leap. What he did was he jumped from person to person, and he literally became them. He had his consciousness in their body, and he had to figure out what was going on in their life, why he was there, what he was there to change. It's really what it is. So quantum jumping is quantum immortality used to live forever. That would be if the main character, whose name is Sam, you can tell I think this was the 80s, could have been the 80s. That would be if Sam, who was the scientist, did the quantum jumping, instead of jumping through time and wanting to come, because his main thing was he got lost and he was trying to come home. He couldn't figure out how to get back to his own body. That's what I'm talking about. So, but let's say he was using this method to live forever. Like his main reason for jumping was he didn't want to die. So say he jumped into a body and lived out that life, and this body got into a car accident, it was going to die, and he jumped into another one. Or maybe he got to live in that body for a while, and the body was just getting old, 90 years old, and it's going to die. He decides to jump into another consciousness. This is quantum jumping. This is using quantum jumping as quantum immortality. So that's how those two things link up. Now, do I think we could do it? I think we could totally do it. Do I know how? I'm going to be honest. I think I've done it. I've been to other planets, I've been to other dimensions, I've seen a lot of different other things. And the thing is all from this space, but not in this space. Just consciousness was gone. Now, what was going on with this body? I don't know while I was gone. I do know when I wanted to come back, there were times, I'm not going to lie, that it was scary when I didn't know I was out of my body and I was experiencing different things. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm in another dimension. Wait a minute. Wait, oh shit. Wait a minute. I want to get back into my body. How did this happen? Sort of thing. And there were times when I purposely left my body to go to other planes. So I wanted to see other things, but I was always able to get back into my body when I wanted to. Those times when I realized that I really wasn't in control and I don't know what happened were really scary. So I will say that quantum jumping, and here's the thing, I don't know if I was in other bodies. I could have been in other bodies. And I was experiencing different things. So there's so many different questions when you really get into like the nitty gritty of it and you really start getting into your spiritual work and doing that, just taking things to a different level. But I wouldn't recommend it until you're ready. But anyway, the whole point of this video is to introduce the concept of quantum jumping and quantum immortality. Can we live forever? Do we need these bodies? Can we get rid of them and experience life on a different level? Like, what if I wanted to be a movie star? Could I just... Now, see, this gets dangerous because you know what Quantum Leap never told us is what happens to the consciousness inside of that body when Sam jumped into it. Because then we can get into some ethical stuff and just different stuff. Like, does that consciousness go to sleep? Like, what happens? And then maybe it does. I don't remember. I mean, it was so long that I saw it, but I don't remember that being any part of it. You know, and it was like not like a sitcom, but it wasn't like anything really deep. Maybe I'm just looking too deep into it. But there are also some ethical things that you would have to think about when you're jumping and leaping bodies and doing all this different stuff. But once again, these are just theories. So on my new platform here, I'm not going to say my new channel because it's going to stay under Meta Christian. It's just like a new series that I do. It's about theories. It's about questioning things. It's about research. Like, I want to hear what everybody thinks about everything. Like, so look it up, guys. Look up quantum jumping and look up quantum immortality and tell me what you think. I don't know if I mentioned the near-death experiences. I did look up some research on quantum immortality, and one of the things they said is that there were people that would have these near-death experiences, and when they came back, it would be things that were just kind of different. And it was almost like maybe they jumped timelines. Maybe they switched consciousness and didn't even know it. It's just that on the moment of death, they decided, I ain't trying to go, and saw an opportunity to go to another timeline and went, but didn't know it. You know, kind of a subconscious, conscious thing. And so when they come back to this reality, something's different. They could have a kid that they didn't know they had, or a husband they didn't know they had, or, you know, it's the same life, but something's a little different. Like the job they work is not the job that they thought they had. Or maybe, you know, they're allergic to peanuts all of a sudden, and people are like, you've always been allergic to peanuts. You're like, I've never been allergic to peanuts. Then you've always been allergic to peanuts. You know, so it's like crazy shit like that in their minds, like stuff like that. So, and I think maybe they just start to, well, obviously they talk about it. Obviously it hits them as something's very odd because I've been alive 42 years and I have never been allergic to peanuts. But now I am. What the fuck, you know? So I do notice the differences. And then if it's big shit, like you know, had a kid that now I don't have, or a marriage or some craziness, then it's really like, okay, I had this near death experience, but and I had this theory that I posted on Facebook a while back is, what if people that have amnesia are not really people that have amnesia? What if they have just switched realities? Mirror work can switch realities. That person on one side could have chosen a different timeline. So, what happens to the one that was already in that timeline? So, these are the questions that I really be asking myself at like 2 in the morning, and I start researching stuff and come up with all these crazy theories. So, I usually keep stuff to myself, or I have a select few people that I talk to. But what I keep hearing over and over again is, you need to really get this information out and talk about this stuff. So, that's what this is about. So tell me what you think, guys. Also, follow me on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and I gotta put all the stuff like in the comments. If you watch the video before I do, I'll put it in there. But for me, please like, share, subscribe. If you like it, please comment. I really want to hear what you guys think. And all right, see you later. Bye.